Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Friday, September 4th, 2020, and today I'm going to be taking a look at a 2020 governor election prediction. So the last time I released one of these was in June 2020. So some of the races have actually changed. There aren't too many. There are 11 toss-up races. Normally in a midterm election year, we have the majority of races, I think 34, and then we have two in off years right after the general election, the presidential election. So I believe 2017 is an example. Virginia and New Jersey were up. 2018 were the rest of the governor races. 2019 was Louisiana, Kentucky, and I believe another state. I could be wrong about that, but I believe it's Louisiana, Kentucky, absolutely. And then now we have these 11 toss-up races. So pretty much we're going to be taking a look at where all of these races stand and make a projection in each one of these toss-up races. Now, this isn't focused on too much, but it really should be. We're talking about states that are going to go through redistricting following the 2020 census. Now, the reason why we don't talk about it too much is because most of these races are considered to be safe. I think, realistically, only some of them are considered to be competitive. And overall, this actually has pretty good news for the GOP. You know, a lot of these states are Republican states, and they aren't super competitive, which means no wasted money, and also you solidify redistricting for your party, unless it's a state such as North Dakota, which only has one district. But Montana's a perfect example. That is actually a pretty contested governor race. Number one, because the Republican Party has not won an election in the governor's race since 2000. On top of that, there is an expected gain in electoral votes, moving up from 3 to 4, which means there very well could be some type of gerrymandering to make the districts equally as Republican or, you know, both Republican, but it's going to be quite difficult to see how they would draw that, considering that there's a certain part of the state that typically votes for the Democrats. But anyways, Montana is expected to gain a House district. Utah, you know, that has some House districts that need to be redrawn in order for the Democrats not to win the 4th district again. Missouri, Indiana, North Carolina absolutely had a very horrible history with redistricting, but Delaware, Vermont, and really New Hampshire don't have much to worry about in terms of redistricting. It's going to be really hard for us to see how the Democrats lose in those states. Maybe New Hampshire, maybe in one district. It's very difficult for me to see how they could draw both districts to be lopsided in favor of the GOP. But 11 toss-up races. Let's characterize all of the safe ones. We don't need to worry too much about Washington. This state goes to the Democrats. There isn't any real surprise about that state. Another state going to the Democrats is Joe Biden's home state of Delaware. Both Washington and Delaware are going to solidly go for the Democratic Party. But unfortunately for the Democrats, that's the last state I can characterize as safe. For the GOP, they have some safe states as well. They are going to easily carry North Dakota's governor race. They are going to easily carry Utah's as well, Indiana's, and West Virginia. What's the reason? So right as I was talking about West Virginia, my screen recorder cut out, but I was essentially just recapping what has happened in the past couple of years in West Virginia. So in 2016, a Democrat actually won this seat on the same ballot that Donald Trump won the election. It was now incumbent Governor Jim Justice. He ended up winning with 49% of the vote. So he won West Virginia on the same ballot Trump won this state, with every single county going for Trump. And the reason why, you know, we're talking about this as a safe GOP state now is not because the incumbent retired, not because the incumbent is expected to lose, but because the incumbent switched parties. In 2017, incumbent Governor Jim Justice announced he was switching from the Democratic Party to the Republican Party. This was a blow to the Democrats, considering that they had just lost a governor when they already were down 33-16 at that point in time. So West Virginia, I will say, you know, goes to the GOP by a solid margin. Doesn't matter that he switched parties. We're not going to see a flip in the governor's race. This could have been targeted by maybe someone like Joe Manchin had he lost in 2018, but since he had won, you know, it's very hard for me to see and draw a scenario where we see a Democrat winning in West Virginia, especially now more than ever. So moving past West Virginia, that's a state that should be considered safe for the GOP. What's another state that should be considered safe? New Hampshire. Now, New Hampshire I actually characterized as lean in my June 2020 prediction. New data suggests that this race is absolutely solid. It's as solid as the Democratic Party for the Senate race. So I will say Chris Sununu easily going to win here. They run for re-election every 2 years, so he's a relatively well-known name. He's amongst the top 10 governors. In fact, the top 10 governors in the country, every single one of them are Republicans, or at least they were before COVID-19. That has drastically changed now, but before COVID and during, Chris Sununu still maintains a very high approval rating, and he is on track to win his election by a safe margin. This moves from lean not to likely, but to safe for the GOP. So the Republicans are at a safe 24. The overall party composition doesn't really matter. We're not talking about an entire voting body that makes as many decisions as the Senate or the House of Representatives, but I will say that redistricting is important, but some of these states are single districts, and some of these states Democrats really never had hope at getting redistricted better. But, New Hampshire, safe for the Republican Party, and that's it for safe states for the GOP. At least the Democrats should see that as a plus, but we have some likely states for both the Democrats and the Republicans. So for likely states for the Democrats, I'd actually consider North Carolina as a likely state for the Democrats. We are seeing an incumbent, Roy Cooper, running for re-election. He won on the same year Trump won North Carolina by 4%. So, it was a narrow win. I mean, he barely won that election. Had Trump won by a larger margin, he would not be governor today. But his approval rating is very good for a Democrat in a traditionally conservative state. In an election year such as this one, he's outperforming Donald Trump. He is outperforming Donald Trump, outperforming Joe Biden and Cal Cunningham by pretty significant margins. I mean, we see numbers where sometimes he's up 9 to 15% in this state running for re-election. I will say that this governor's race will likely, as I'm characterizing, likely go to the Democrats, but it's not completely out of reach for the Republicans. Let's say Trump dramatically outperforms the numbers that he has right now and wins North Carolina by a 4-point margin. We could see a swing that possibly narrows down the governor's race, but it's really hard for me to see how he loses, but it's not impossible for him to lose if that makes sense. So that puts the Democrats at 23 seats. We have 24 seats, 24 governorships for the Republicans. Let's move on to likely Republican seats. So, in the state of Missouri, this is another likely Republican seat. I haven't really characterized it as safe in quite some time now. My last prediction I didn't. That's just because Missouri is expected to narrow down. Mike Parson is the incumbent Republican governor. We expect a close race, as we did have one in 2016 on top of the Senate race that happened at that point in time. But Missouri, absolutely close. I will say that the GOP candidate will likely win, and he will end up winning a full term, but still, it's narrower than Indiana, it's narrower than North Dakota and Utah, even though this state is traditionally for the GOP. Now, the final likely Republican state, can you guess it? Is it Montana or Vermont? The obvious answer would be Montana, but it's not. It's Vermont. There's an incumbent Republican in this seat, Phil Scott. He's the governor of Vermont. Both Vermont and New Hampshire vote to elect their governors every 2 years. So he was up in the ballot in 2018. And even in a Democratic wave year, he practically had a Republican wave. He won by a very solid margin. Honestly, the lieutenant governor is running against him in Vermont. To be honest with you, I don't see a future for him. I mean, yes, he's the lieutenant governor, but this guy's popular. He's well known. He's popular among the top 10 before COVID-19. And I will say that I expect him to 100% carry this race without stuttering once. And I don't think this campaign is going to have too many faults. And even though it is Vermont, and even though they are very much pro-Democrat on the presidential level, we're seeing a lot of split ticket voters, not only here, but also in New Hampshire and in some other states. But moving past Vermont, moving past New Hampshire, we've moved past all the likely states, and this leaves one race in particular. Now, the reason why I think Montana is actually very interesting is because of that additional district expected to be added. We're talking about 2 congressional districts from Montana, which means they would no longer have one incumbent representative. And Montana has actually had some very competitive races. Not only is the presidential race within single digits at this point, Trump is up by 9%. Pretty solid, but still, he won it by 19% 4 years ago. The governor's race, as you can see, is competitive. The Senate race is competitive, and the House race is competitive because the House guy is retiring. So let's just talk about Montana politics really quickly. The incumbent House of Representatives member is running for the governor election, even though he lost the governor election in 2016 to the incumbent governor, who is now leaving the governor's mansion to run for the Senate against Steve Daines, the incumbent senator. And then, we're looking at all of these candidates from the past that are coming back up to run. We have, I believe, the Attorney General of Montana, Matt Rosendale, or he's the state auditor, one of those with an A, running now for the representative position against Kathleen Williams. And there's just a whole number of things happening in Montana with local politics there, but almost every single race there is competitive. I think the only one that is probably the least competitive is the presidential race, but Trump is still only up by 9%. So Montana, I normally characterize this for the Democrats, and they have won here in every election since 2000. And this is going to break the streak, and I think it's going to break the hearts of many Democrats in this state. 16 years, gone. Now that I think that, obviously I'm not holding that much weight, but I'm saying now I have flipped this state from my previous characterization of tilt Democrat, not to tilt Republican, not even toss-up, lean Republican. So Montana goes to the GOP, which means there's a net gain of 1 following Kentucky's flip in 2019. A net gain of 1 for the Republicans, 27-23. or returning to 2018 following those governor elections. So flips, anything different than the normal elections. The only real change is Montana. Goes from Democrat control to Republican control, but the rest of the map stays static. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord link for you to go ahead and join. Sorry for getting this video out pretty late. Like I said, the screen recorder cut out, which means I have to completely re-render the video, piece it all together, so it will take a little bit for me to upload. It probably should be up around 9:30. Again, thank you all for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.